Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky. That is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, what is up, man?
Well, this is episode 47 of Basketball by Association, and the last couple weeks we've kind of had some debates about who to pick or, kind of had to dig deep into the barrel. But for today's, while 47 is not a popular number 47 is synonymous really with one single player. He was an all-star. He had a really nice run, especially early in his career. We can't go any other way besides AK-47, Andrei Kirilenko from the Utah Jazz. His first couple seasons, he was a wrecking ball who just came out of nowhere. I remember watching highlights of him as a rookie especially, and people underestimated this Russian kid. They had no idea where he came from. There wasn't a lot of tape on him, and he would just dunk on people. He would swat shots into the third row. He was a nightmare and really was a good player throughout his career, although he was one of those guys who landed that monster contract after his rookie deal ran out and maybe had a little trouble living up to, being the number one billing guy, the cornerstone guy in Utah. But he was a fun player in his prime.
He was, and he was the epitome of Utah basketball.
Yeah, I always say that he and Shawn Marion were the most uncoordinated, athletic freaks I've ever seen. Like, they were so athletic, they were so good, and there was just times where it looked like a nightmare, and yet they would still make a play. They were so disruptive and all over the place, and they were obviously contemporaries of one another, playing similar positions. They could do a little bit of everything, really Swiss Army knife type of players, but there would just be some ugly sequences where it's like, where did that come from? How did this guy make an NBA roster? And yet it would work. It was just a crazy thing. Those two are forever tied in my NBA memory.
I had not thought about Shawn Marion that way, but that's a good point. I do know that watching Kirilenko was a lot like watching a newborn giraffe.
It was.
It was like, but then with not falling on his face all the time was just a lot of like, oh, this is going to end. Oh, hey, look at that.
And it was so unpredictable. I think it would disrupt opponents defensively because he was all arms and legs.
Yeah.
Marion was very, very quick too, and was another long-armed, springy guy. They both could get up a lot higher than people figured, especially in those first couple seasons. And Marion, of course, had the benefit of Steve Nash, really setting him up. But Kirilenko got to play with Deron Williams during his prime, and that was a pretty good Utah team with Carlos Boozer. While he was good for the first, few seasons that they were there, that was a really solid group that they had.
No, I'm very, very, very excited to be able to watch them. Joel, this is I'm honored that we get to call this the Andrei Kirilenko episode.
All right, let's do it.
I'm so happy that this is happening for us. Joel, this is, I think, one of my favorite times of year.
Interesting.
Because at a certain point in the year, and it's usually around the All-Star break, which is traditionally now, that it feels to me, at least if it's not pushed by the media, it comes out, which is where is LeBron in the grand scheme of like MVP discussion, right?
And that you like that. That's among your favorite. A lot of people have burned out on that a long time ago. Interesting.
I've burned out on it a long time. I just feel like I don't know if it's like you just run out of storylines to talk about it, or you don't want to talk about certain storylines. But like at some point, like you just always default to, so is LeBron the MVP? And I think what is an interesting question about this that brings it up even more this week especially is because there was a particular tweet from someone who is very good at the basketball too currently, who asked the question, why is Ed King James still getting better? How? Blow my mind emoji 3 different times. And that's from Draymond Green.
Who is not one to pay compliments very often to rivals, much less division rivals who you will meet in the playoffs likely at some point if you want to go anywhere.
No, yeah, and that's why I think it's so interesting to sort of look at this discussion this way. Not necessarily is he the MVP, because
and let's not go down the GOAT conversation rabbit hole again either, right?
Or literally it's 2 dudes, and It happens every day in my timeline, and I don't know why people don't get tired of having that exact same conversation over and over again, because you're either going to spin your numbers one way or you're going to spin them the other way,
right?
And that's just the way the discussion is going to be.
Yeah, you already have a preconceived notion. You've already made up your mind. There's no convincing anyone on either side of that really anymore.
Oh, absolutely. You're in. Listen, I'm not saying LeBron's the greatest, but I'm saying he's definitely right neck and neck to me. But that doesn't matter at this point. Dude's 36 years old and has a ton of playoff miles on him, but he's still playing at a super high elite level, including this year. So let me ask you this. Does Draymond Green have some sort of, in a year where the Super Bowl features like a 44-year-old quarterback, like, is there something to be said that LeBron James is getting better for what his age is? I don't mean like just better overall, but maybe he's adjusted his game to where he is able to stay this elite for this long. Like, how do you sort of interpret what Draymond Green is saying, and does he have some validity there?
Oh, absolutely. LeBron James, first and foremost, is a basketball savant. We know the physical gifts that he's been endowed with, and a Karl Malone frame with, Magic Johnson vision, and ball handling ability. He's been a phenomenal leader, even though at times maybe a divisive one, but I think all good leaders are in their own way. There's always going to be guys who don't fall in line with that. But I think first and foremost, what's always stood out to me, beyond the talent, which is, of course, generational, is LeBron is a basketball savant. I've had the privilege of interviewing him a couple of times during his Miami Heat days, so it's been a while. But it even struck me just in speaking with him in person, and people have said this before too. He is able to recall just about any play in any game that he's seen, whether he played in it or not. His ability to break down scouting reports, he gives very specific answers. He's got to definitely respect the question and respect the reporter. There are times that he'll default into the, kind of more cliched speak, but when he's really invested in that conversation, he's as smart as any coach out there. And I know there's a lot of people who, the media loves to blow smoke up LeBron's butt, right? Love to do that. But, I say this in all honesty. He is, if not the smartest, right up there with the smartest of any basketball player I've ever had the privilege of interviewing myself. And there's been a couple hundred of them. And then also, being able to watch people and their responses and that sort of thing. So, yeah, being able to give a good answer is one thing, but he's constantly throughout his career understood the scouting report of his opponents. He has constantly adjusted his game and concentrated on various things. You look at where LeBron James was coming into the league and how many times his game has taken a different level, right? The passing ability has always been there, but the elite defender wasn't there until a little bit down the line. The knockdown three-point shooter has been a long time coming, but it's here, and it's been here for years now. The ability to post up on the block and run plays through like he's a power forward, that was years in the making as well. So, it's easy to add facets to your game when you are one of the top athletes on the planet, right? But you need that work ethic and the wisdom to be able to deploy it, and that's never been in question. So even as his physical skills, you can make the case again that his stamina has begun to erode a little bit. We've seen that. The defense kind of comes and goes at times, but the wisdom and ability to deploy that, I agree with Draymond, just keeps getting better and better, knowing your weaknesses and knowing what you don't know. I think we froze up. Where'd you go?
I think we're back, Joel.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you lose me or did I lose you? Because you were spinning.
At this point, that's what's great about the internet.
Okay.
So you were talking about the sort of possible eroding of the defense and possible sort of stamina, I should say, in the defense sort of coming up here or there. I think it's interesting for a guy at this age who literally, it feels like at this point I don't remember a year other than 2 years ago when like everyone was hurt and he was like they haven't made the playoffs. But like this is also a guy that has so many miles because he plays all the games, right? This isn't one of those dudes that wants to take nights off. He wants to give the fans what they want, what they pay for. He knows he's a draw, and I don't know as far as where he's going to stack up with all the numbers are, but there's a part of that I really appreciate. But the part I'm interested in is when Draymond Green says that he thinks he's getting better. Do you think it's better, or do you think he's just getting more well-rounded is not even the right thing. Maybe to use your term, or his wisdom is basically being able to understand what he can and cannot do, when he can and cannot do it. And that allows him to be able to do what he can do at the right times and how he can score 30 or 35 in a game still because, he's been able to figure out, when to cut weight, when to add this or that to his defense, who's around him to be able to help. And that sort of makes him be perceived as better because he's been able to use that big old basketball brain of his.
Yeah, and his body has changed multiple times too. You brought up a good point in that. A couple seasons ago, I think when he first arrived in LA, he dropped a bunch of weight, right? He looked really skinny compared to what he had been in Miami, where he was about as ripped as I think at any point in his career. But he really dropped a lot of weight because he was going to be playing point guard that year. And so he did that. And then now this year he looks, I think, kind of in that middle ground. And that's because he's had to switch to playing back to small forward and power forward a lot. Like, it's that ability to know what your team needs, put in the work to be able to provide that. And then when you're out on the court, like you said, pick your spots. That's always the first lesson for really truly athletic players, right? It's a rare player who can come in and play 110 miles per hour all the time and actually be effective. You think about like conversations we've had with Trae Young, or now Colin Sexton is a great example of this. Even Derrick Rose, who had a Rookie of the Year season, you can come in and play 100 miles an hour, but it's that ability to actually shift gears and pick your spots and slow up, speed up, cross over, change directions, knowing where lanes are, and then to be able to fit that for yourself and find your spots. We've talked about that with LaMelo Ball, right? Being able to find your shot, what's good for you, but also then being able to process not only the 4 other teammates that you have on the floor, but the 5 defenders that are on the floor and the scouting report on each of those defenders and where they're going to be and what they're good at and what they're weak at and where you can exploit that. And then it's going to flip on the other side too, because they're coming back at you, and you better know the scouting report on all 5 offensive players as well as your 4 defensive teammates and where they might get burned and where they need help. And that's where players can get really good at that. And there are certain guys who understand it on one side of the floor. James Harden is a savant on the offensive end, and he's a really good passer. I think Luka is a savant on the offensive end as well, just being able to understand all those moving parts. LeBron James is a supercomputer on both ends of the floor, and he has been for most of his career, right? There's been seasons that he's been beat. He's human. He's made mistakes. There are teams that have been better. The San Antonio Spurs and the Dallas Mavericks got him. The Toronto Raptors got him. But they all had to have like the series of their lives to win NBA finals against him. And we've seen him do it with multiple teams. Obviously, his track record and biography is well known. But to bring this back to what Draymond has been saying, and again, that's high praise coming from Draymond Green because of who he is and how competitive he is. And he does not throw olive branches like this during the middle of the season. It's just that sign of respect. But yeah, it is wisdom, and it's the work ethic, and of course the absolute God-given ability on the athletic side of things, but also on that big basketball brain of his. And it's one of the biggest, that the NBA has ever seen.
Yeah. And I think that's when we go back and sort of look at the finality when LeBron's finally done. And this is what I always talked about. And we've talked about this for years, whether it be on this podcast or on the radio show I used to have, is that I wish that people could just appreciate what's happening now with like LeBron. Like, we're not trying to compare, you just brought him up, Luka to anybody right now. Like LeBron came in with all the fanfare, and we had to immediately his entire career. And you know what? He's lived up to the billing. But I wish
and
people,
then some, right?
right,
And
right.
then some.
And I wish people would just get off the Michael versus him debate. And it's hard to because it's online all the time. Just appreciate what's happening now. And then if you want to late in the career when it looks like LeBron's lost a step or two, start talking about it, because LeBron's doing something that's truly special. I honestly feel like that as great as Michael was, LeBron's much more versatile. Like, he has changed so much more to be able to continue this longevity. His legs should be shot right now. Like, that you cannot have played the amount of minutes he has played regular season, not taking days off, postseason, all the trips to the finals consecutively, barely having an off season, and then coming back. You can't do that unless you change, or unless you're not only gifted enough and athletically prowessed enough and genetically well, but if you're not able to change who you are physically and to sort of adapt to where you're going to be and where you are now and how you can extend your career. I just think there's so much more versatility to LeBron to be able to extend his career this long that we can continue having this conversation.
Yeah. And LeBron's ability to, I think his career changed forever in a lot of people's minds when he was able to go back to Cleveland, a place where theoretically every bridge had been burned and no championship had been got, and to be able to show up and deliver that and to keep plugging away and get them to, 4 NBA finals. I think that forever changed the arc, because before it was, this is a great player, but he pulled a fast one and he took a cop out to go to Miami. And of course that was going to be a good team. And of course he was going to look really good. And of course they should win a finals or two. And that's great. But coming back to Cleveland, I think the narrative has changed. And here again, it's LeBron being smart. That may have been calculated to change the career narrative as much as he wanted to bring a championship to his hometown, which is admirable as well.
But he did it.
He did it. He did it.
Like that city hadn't won anything in 40 years,
right?
Like maybe 50 years. Like that, he did it. And when you have an entire city who can't win a championship, much less the basketball team, and to be able to put that team on his back to be able to win a championship.
Well, and here's how it changed things too. Now, when we have the MJ versus LeBron argument, even the MJ stans, most of them, the vast majority of them, still have no problem saying, but LeBron is number 2. He might not be number 1 in my book,
right,
but I can't argue that he's number 2. And he's close. And there's a respect factor that I think, Kobe was a pretty hated player during most of his career. We forget that because we lionized him so much at the tail end of his career and, on his unfortunate passing too, that people didn't necessarily appreciate that. And we talked about that with Janelle Moore like a month ago. But at the tail end of his career, I think the perspective was there. And even the people that really didn't like him, myself included, there was that respect factor where you knew what you had seen. And I do believe that it's not a hater situation for LeBron in most cases. There's still some people that don't like him, but that's always going to be the case. You're never going to have 100% adoration. But I do think it's changed now where, he may not be my number 1 guy, but there's no question that he's a top 2, top 3 all-time player, no matter how you dice it, no matter your opinion.
Yeah, and I didn't want to get too deep into the whatever situation with Michael and he, but I did think it was interesting that someone, as you say, who's not effusive of praise of really anybody, much less someone who he's trying to beat for, years and years to win championships, that literally like an hour and a half or so, like this right after play, it's like, dude, what's going on? Like, why is this guy at 36 who's got 1 million minutes in him?
Mm-hmm.
Why is he still this good? And maybe the getting better is a little bit of hyperbole, but he's still like top flight in the league, man. Like you can't have a conversation about MVP without at least throwing his name in the mix. And that's a credit to everything sort of LeBron's done. So I think it's really, really sort of, I think we're in just such a unique situation. We don't get all-time type players all the time. And it's just fun to watch him no matter what team he's on. Wish he chose the Knicks a couple years ago, got to be honest with you. But, that was never going to happen.
No, that was not. Can confirm that was not a possibility.
Yeah. Oh, well.
All right, where do you want to go? You want to do a Manscaped ad, or you want to shift gears to a different topic?
Sorry, I was depressed. I was a little depressed. But you know what? Listen, I didn't need him. Right? I got Julius Randle now. Who cares, right? More double-doubles than you're throwing your face at. Who needs that?
Quality win for the Knicks last night against Portland, who is not a world beater, but the Blazers are a good team. They're a little banged up with no CJ McCollum and no Nurkic again. But I will say this, and I had the thought, I didn't get a chance to watch the Knicks game, but watching through the highlights and then also looking at the Nuggets and Kings game where the Kings got yet another quality win against the Nuggets. I think this is the third time they've beat them this year. Sacramento and New York have both been kind of the punching bags of the NBA the last couple of years, of the laughing stock. There's been other teams that have been bad, but those two have been mismanaged for so long. But all of a sudden, and we saw flashes of it last year already with Sacramento, like those are two quality NBA teams that are worth watching every night. They're competitive. They're in games. They've got some smart players on their teams. Like they are, and I don't want to jinx them, but they're turning the corner, and it's been some, dark days for both franchises. And I just saw kind of the parallel last night and looking through highlights and going, yeah, the Kings are, De'Aaron Fox we know is good, but he's playing like a veteran who knows exactly what he can do now. He's setting people up. Tyrese Halliburton has been phenomenally smart for them. I don't know what his ceiling is besides maybe phenomenally smart NBA player, but he's looking really good. And Harrison Barnes and, Buddy Hield make a lot of sense there. Rashawn Holmes is having a career year. Like that's a good Sacramento Kings team. I don't know where they fit in the West, but I feel the same way when I watch the Knicks. It's like, oh, they've got actual credible NBA players, and not just that, but the players fit in some weird way. And you and I had major question marks about the Knicks coming into the season on fit, not on talent. We realized there was some talent there, but how it was all going to fit together. And, credit to Tom Thibodeau and credit to those players that there's something cohesive there, enough to be a 500 team and in a playoff hunt.
Yeah, and I gotta be honest with you. I'm still quietly optimistic because I feel like I'm in a bit of a dream sequence here, just because I'm watching the team be in contention, as opposed to sort of nowhere near contention. That it's nice to see games that even if you lose, you're like in them.
Yeah,
that you're like, this feels different. And listen, I don't know how long it lasts, if they make the playoffs or not, but this is a respectable basketball team that's been put in there. And I think it also helps when you don't play 35 straight games on the road on the West Coast. So you sort of get your legs, especially with how hard Thibodeau coaches. Like,
right,
that team sort of lost its legs at the end on the West Coast. But
they did. But I will give Tibbs credit too, and I've been very down on him for a long time, basically since his Chicago stint ended. I was not a huge fan of the Timberwolves bringing him in to coach a few years ago with such a young team, because that was not his MO. And it turned out to be true. Like, he just brought in his guys and didn't really coach up any of the young guys. But here I will give him credit, because the rotation has not been 8 men deep. It's been 10, even 11 guys. I'm not seeing anybody logging like 45 minutes a game. And maybe that's just because New York doesn't have those players. I'm a little bit concerned when he brings in Taj Gibson. As long as, bringing Taj Gibson aboard, if he's going to be a coach on the floor and a guy who can help instill the system and be a leader and all that is fine, as long as Taj Gibson is not playing 20 minutes a game in today's NBA. And that one's a little iffy. And of course, we hear the Derrick Rose rumors now too. So I think Tibbs' worst inclinations are still always there under the surface, and you're concerned about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I got to ask you, as a Knicks fan, would you welcome Derrick Rose into that mix, or the fact that you've got Emmanuel Quigley, who does not need to lose any minutes whatsoever at this point, or even the fact that like Elfrid Payton has been balling the last few weeks and has been solid overall this season. Those guys are going to lose minutes. I know Derrick Rose is not a pure point guard anymore, and he can play the off guard spot too. He did that in Minnesota. He's even played a little bit of small forward type of wing. So as a bench scorer, maybe could be helpful. But does that worry you now where the Knicks are in this sort of thing? And you've seen Derrick Rose in a Knicks jersey before.
Yeah, I don't want to be mean to Derrick Rose because he's done nothing to me. But I feel like where New York is right now in this sort of rebuilding phase that's going, I think by most people's standards, better than expected so far, that I don't think you really need to bring someone in who could take away minutes from Payton or Quickly. Quickly is going to be the starting point guard for the end of the year. He's just playing himself into a position where I think he can be eventually trusted to just sort of be that everyday guy. And Payton has done more than an admirable job for New York there. And Julius Randle, as we mentioned, is throwing doubles out like they're going on a style, man. Like it's a fun team to watch, dare I say. It's an interesting team to watch. The names, a couple of the names on the roster that you probably didn't expect to be playing this well. There's a couple of disappointments in there that I'm just not going to be able to do anything about. Like
Kevin Knox may not be an NBA player. We may just have to admit that.
That's my biggest one. Dude's just not even playing like anymore. It's not even just how well is he playing when he gets on there. Like,
yeah, and
trying
Frank,
to make it, if you
Frank
can't make it a rotation, like I don't know what you're gonna do, man.
Yeah, Tilakina is another one where that was a high Knicks draft pick, and there was certainly promise there. He's got a lot of the NBA tools and the NBA body, but that hasn't been put together, right? And I don't think that's coming anytime soon. So. But you win some, you lose some. I will say that RJ Barrett looks like, I don't know that he's a number one cornerstone type of player like they hoped, but can he be a strong scorer on a decent team? Yeah,
he can. Yeah, he can. I think he did he get 20, 18 or 20 the other last Sunday or Saturday night, whatever it was, against Portland. That he's a good scorer, and Payton shot like 20 times
right.
against
Portland. He was 10 of 19.
That's right, he was 10 of 19. Yeah. Like, I almost feel as if what I want to have happened with the Knicks didn't quite happen, like especially with the Kevin Knox of the world. But the guys I didn't expect a ton out of, like, and again, RJ Barrett's somebody I did expect a bunch out of, and he's doing fine. He's doing fine. There's nothing wrong with him. I think the only thing wrong with RJ Barrett may be where he was drafted and what people's expectations may have been when he was drafted at that spot, as opposed to what he was actually going to be in New York. Julius Randle is a huge win, but I told you on the radio show I had before, I liked him when the Knicks picked him up, that I thought that was going to be good for New York, and it has worked out quite nicely for them. And Payton, I had no idea on Payton. I got to be honest with you. Payton surprised the hell out of me. I don't know where this is coming from Elfrid Payton, but I'm cool.
Well, I mean, he was a fairly high draft pick as well. There was a lot riding on him. I think it was New Orleans that took him. And another rookie or young guy who didn't work out. I shouldn't say rookie, but he had a good rookie season. Dennis Smith Jr. The Knicks thought they had something there, and that's not coming together either.
Yeah.
But again, guys come out of the woodwork that you didn't expect, and sometimes the ones that you expected either don't pan out or they live up to it. There was a lot of good games Saturday night. Normally we don't do a lot of game recap-y stuff here, but I want to highlight one. Dallas and Golden State. If you haven't had a chance,
man.
if you have not had a chance to watch that game, go find the replay of it, even if it's just the highlights. That is everything you pay money for to watch an NBA game, because not only was it two offensively inclined teams, neither of whom could stop each other. Dallas is a terrible defense. The Warriors are a middling defense. So I say that as a backhanded compliment that the offense was that good and the defense at the time was, not always very cohesive, but just a laser show. And you've got Steph Curry and Luka going at it back and forth. Steph Curry, 57 points in the loss. Luka, 42 points, 11 assists in the very narrow win. Dallas needed that one badly. It almost went to overtime, 134 to 132. And I got to tell you, Arky, I wanted the Warriors to win that game. I've been so happy to see Steph back playing like Steph Curry. We've talked about the Warriors quite a bit, but even though they lost, my fantasy team was very, very happy with those 57 points and the 700 threes that he hit in that game. And if you want your fantasy team to be happy, you want to be happy, you do that by winning some money on your fantasy team. And I would think that $1 million winning that with your fantasy team would probably make you pretty happy. Over at DraftKings, all new players can play free for the $1 million top prize with your first deposit. Thanks to our partnership, that's BbA Brawl Network and DraftKings. Here's what you do. Create your DraftKings DFS account and make a deposit. DraftKings will credit your account with a free contest entry. And then you draft your lineup. You compete for millions of dollars in prizes. That's not a bad deal, right? Just go to dkng.co/partner to play. That's dkng.co/partner. Act quickly. The offer ends soon. Minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details.
You almost had dueling 50 burgers in that game, which is pretty darn solid. I mean, Luka had 11 assists. We went 42, 7, and 11, which is just.
Remember when you were like, "Oh, it's impressive that Elfrid Payton went 11 for 19 from the floor."
Yeah.
Steph went 11 for 19 from 3-point land.
Yeah, but Steph's a different dude,
right?
Steph's just that guy, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's almost unfair. Like his lightning release, in his ability to sort of put up a shot whenever he wants. It's just. It's silly, and it's so fun to watch. And I know there are a lot of old school people who like to sort of watch games that are, I don't even say 90s to 80s, but not 134, 132, right. Or not what the Wizards Nets game was last
a defensive battle where you really got to work to get a basket.
But you know what I think overcomes that? When you have 2 point guards going at each other like this.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you have a mano-a-mano matchup like this, I think listen, I could be wrong. You guys could tell us on Twitter if you are at Arky. I think this kind of sort of mitigates, if you're the old school type, mitigates some of that, where's all the defense? When you can just watch two dudes just throw daggers at each other.
It is. And let me take a different tack here for a moment and throw some shade on Luka Doncic, which I don't think anybody ever does yet, because he still is in that honeymoon darling stage of his career. But this maybe satiates some of the old heads too, where I need more defense. Dallas's defense has been terrible all year. It was not good last year. They have some decent defenders on that team. Josh Richardson is a plus defender. Dorian Finney-Smith is a plus defender. Maxi Kleber is normally a plus defender, depending on the matchup. And they've got a fair number of guys like Dwight Powell, and even to an extent, Kristaps Porzingis in the right role, as long as he's not way out there trying to guard pick and rolls at this point with his bad legs, who are a wash defensively. Luka's next step for this team, he controls so much on the offensive end, is that he's going to have to become a plus defender as well. And he makes defensive plays. He is smart. He's got quick hands, slow feet. But that's kind of the next step for him, because
kind of a little Mr. Miyagi-ish, gotta be honest with you.
Yeah.
Quick hands, slow feet.
It's obvious. The Dallas Mavericks, the defense collapses way too easy. There are ways to get to the point of attack on them, and it doesn't take the Warriors and Steph, just bombing away from three. But Draymond Green got to wherever he wanted to go in that game Saturday night as well, and Green had 15 assists, right? This is not a blow-by guy. Obviously, Draymond Green is very smart. He picks angles and timing, and he's strong. But if he's getting into the lane that many times for drive and dish, even when your defense is spread out, like, you're going to need more people, starting with Luka. You're the cornerstone. You're the franchise guy to really step up on that defensive end, because I don't think it's just, oh, we need more better defenders. Like, Tim Hardaway Jr., never going to be a plus defender. He does what he does, which is to score some points, and sometimes inefficiently, but he keeps the defense honest. But you look up and down that roster, and like, they should not be as bad on that end as they are, especially as a Rick Carlisle coach team. And that is largely the reason that team is 10-14 right now and sitting outside the playoff spot. So I felt like Janelle Moore was kind of starting to get towards that when we talked to her a few weeks ago too, and we were talking about Luka Doncic, and she said, yeah, he's got a lot of James Harden in him. And that's good, right? On the offensive end, that's a high compliment. But there are some times too where it's like, you're going to have to take that same talent, that same drive, and put it on the defensive end. And that's going to be the next step for him. So this may have been the inaugural shade throwing on Luka Doncic, because I don't think I've ever heard too many in the media do that. They love him. He's the golden boy at this point. But we're getting to that stage now where, Luka, you want to take the next step, you're going to have to take that next step.
Well, you're like a legitimate MVP favorite coming into the season. So you have to, like, at some point you got to look with that critical eye and say, all right, what's next? Like, part of what you're doing is not only sort of advancing your own game, but also advancing and helping your team. And,
right.
If you're a middle of the pack team and you're winning just as much as you lose, like, the numbers you put up they get watered down a little bit to a lot of people.
Right. So, and granted, I'm saying that even though his team won, even though he had a phenomenal game, and even though he was plus 18 on the floor, no other Maverick came close to it. Like, the team is phenomenally better in their plus minus when he's out there versus everyone else. So, take my shade throwing with that grain of salt that he is entirely valuable already. But yeah, where's that next step come from? It will be on the defensive end. And I think he's got to go from a guy where you put him out there and you put him on like a medium matchup and you live with that. He's going to have to be a guy who starts taking maybe not the team's best player, but probably their second best player on a routine basis. If Dallas is going to take a step forward with what they have right now. Otherwise, you're going to change that group offensively, trying to load them up with defensive players. And that does make Luka's job a little bit harder, because he's going to have to score that much more.
You mentioned Draymond's 15 assists. That's one off of his career high, which is a 16. He's done that 3 different times in his career. So not the best if you're Dallas, by the way, over there on the old defense.
and Draymond, as a power forward, 2 points on 0 of 2 shooting. He was 2 of 2 at the free throw line, but 15 assists, 6 steals, 4 blocks. Yeah, he had 7 turnovers. But you talk about unique players when we talk about LeBron and Luka and so on. But I can't really think of too many other power forwards like Draymond Green either, right? We've had guys who were defensive first power forwards who were a wrecking ball. Yeah. But guys who are such, facilitation minded like that, and then the ability to rack up everything but points. And yeah, he could score more. I think he'd probably top out at about 14 points a game if you ran stuff to and through him. But he doesn't want that. And normally at the power forward position, like, you don't put 4s out there who get you like 4 points a game and be happy with it. But with Draymond Green, it's completely different.
It's true. Like, it seems like he is at his best, and the team is at his best when he is this guy, like, as opposed to the guy who's trying to get you a double-double consistently. Maybe his double-double is, rebounds and assists, or maybe turnovers and assists. So, there's a couple of quick stories I wanted to get to. Sure. One of them is LeBron related, but I'll get to that at the end of the show. The one I wanted to lead with here is we've not only just hinted or discussed this, but we've flat out talked about it, which is the NBA on TNT has some guys on it that aren't big fans of what's currently happening. Mm-hmm. And we got another example of that this last week. And I want to play for you what Charles Barkley said. It's a quick clip, and then I want to sort of talk about it if you just give me 1 second.
Play like I'm gonna be the old man, get off my lawn. Y'all sit there watching stupid ass basketball. Just jack up threes all night. If they go in, we win. We miss, they lose. Give me a break, you dumbass. Easy.
So, my question is, okay, so we know what Shaq is, we know what Charles are, we know who these guys are, we know sort of their stance. But like, do you think the NBA has concerns or cares for being like the one league that has commentators and former great basketball players who are employed by the network that pays so much money to the NBA for their rights to display their product, to openly crap on their product over and over and over again? It's not like they don't. It feels like they take every opportunity sometimes to do that, and this is another example. We literally was just within 2 weeks ago we were talking about the Donovan Mitchell thing.
Yeah, if they're not concerned, then they're stupid because they should be. It's not just that he's crapping on the product; it's that he's so out of touch with where the vast majority of NBA fans today are, right? He is the old man, but he's the old man yelling at clouds. He's not yelling, "Get off my lawn." He's yelling at clouds. Like, it doesn't make any sense. The game has changed, Charles. It's been well documented why and how we're not going back to the 90s. That was a great time for basketball in its own right. But I said on the BbA 3-pointer, which came out on Friday, my son and I were talking about it. Like, you go back and watch those games from the 90s, and yeah, the highlights still hold up, and some of the matchups still hold up, but the regular hoi polloi, regular season game in January absolutely does not.
Oh, like NBA TV plays a lot of those games sometimes, and especially during the summer, and it's like
there's no movement. It's all ISO. The floor is so, crowded. And yeah, there are some amazing plays that are made at times, but there's also just a lot of throwing the ball at the basket and hoping to get a rebound because you're pushing and shoving each other. And again, I'm a child of the 90s. I grew up watching those games. That's where my love of the game began. So 100%. I'm not bashing it, but I don't really want to go back to that either. So to answer your question about like crapping on the product, number one, you typically shouldn't do that. But when you're out of touch, not only with the product, but also with the fan base, yes, it is time to move on. Can you imagine if day in and day out, Chris Collinsworth or Joe Buck or, whoever was just saying, yeah, the NFL is terrible. That, these guys are just ruining the game. Major League Baseball is to do the same thing. Like, yeah, a commentator should call out what they see, like on that individual basis. Yeah, this guy looks like he's playing lazy. Yeah, this team, they're not in it tonight. They're discombobulated, whatever. The coaching staff's got to step up. Like,
that's not what they're doing. That's
right. Exactly. They're saying the whole game is fundamentally flawed. Well, you know what, Chuck? If you hate watching it so much, hang them up, dude. Hang them up. And I love you, Charles Barkley, but it's time to mosey on down the road and do something else and let somebody else take that seat and take that paycheck, because right now you're cashing paychecks and you're bringing nothing to the table, and all you're doing is denigrating the exact product that you're there to celebrate. And again, you don't need to be a shill for the product, but if you hate it that much, just be done with it. Just be done.
Or, just move on to another segment. Like, you don't have to say, I hate threes. Remember when it was Chuck that before the Warriors won that said that no way a team that just shot 3-pointers was going to win a championship.
Right.
No way that would happen. And I think he was right for the first year. And then the Warriors.
And how many times has he been proven wrong now?
Yeah, it's just the NBA has evolved, and some of the thinking has evolved around it. And you don't have to like analytics, and you don't have to. There's a lot of stats I don't even pay attention to when it comes to basketball. I hate them. But it doesn't mean that that's not where sort of the game is sort of fundamentally where it's at. And it's okay, I think, to have a Chuck or a Shaq sort of on the dais, because I think that's kind of funny and it's some comic relief. But you can't have two of those dudes.
Right.
That's basically that's more than half of your commentary. That's two old dudes. You have Kenny Smith, and then you have Ernie, who's the host and throws everything around. Like, you can't have 67% of your dudes saying that they hate the way the current product is played. That's just not good for the brand. And no other sport has that. There aren't the ESPN has a million NFL shows, and they're not all saying, I hate the way the NFL went. You may have a commentator or two amongst the 100 that they have that say something like that, but they don't. They sort of talk about what happens on the court or on the field at that time. And that's why Kenny is so good at what he does. Kenny's talking about what's happening on the court. And, Kenny didn't retire in 2013. Right? Like, Kenny played the same times the dude played. And Kenny's been okay to sort of talk about the product as it is. And you can have problems with the current product. You just can't hate the product openly because it doesn't make you a good spokesman. Like, it makes me a good spokesman for Manscaped, right? Fellas, we're in the thick of winter and storms are a-brewing, and it looks like where you may be at, you might get 1, 2, maybe 3 inches in the forecast. Well, if you get around that little bush there around your old Peter, you might find yourself your own little 1, 2, maybe even 3 inches. But hey, that's just you and your pants talking, okay? Manscaped.com has a deal for you for the Lawnmower 3.0 where you can get it for 20% off and free shipping. Can you deal with it? Huh? Can you deal with that? 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Now, they have tons of other men's hygiene products as well. They have the nice little ball deodorant if you want to help your nether regions. That's cool. That's cool. I respect the game. All right. I know how the funk can get down there. They also have the toner for the old testicle undercarriage. That makes sense too. Go to manscaped.com, look at all of their hygiene products and the Lawnmower 3.0, which is guaranteed not to nick and cut your nether regions. Don't want that. 20% off with free shipping. Use the promo code BRAWL, BRAWL. Take that to manscaped.com. You want to make sure your winter wiener looks so good. So
please do not throw a hashtag onto that.
No hashtag winter wiener?
Yeah, let's not start that trending.
Okay, last topic I really wanted to get to is the NBA All-Star Game has been basically agreed to that it is going to happen. There is going to be some type of festivities on March the 7th. I think that's the day they picked.
Yeah, one month from today.
Yeah, and one guy who does not like it is LeBron James. He actually called it a slap in the face. He has no energy for it, he says. He doesn't really want to be a part of it. Now, you know this, Joel, that there are some prominent players who are cool with it, who do want to have sort of the All-Star Game. And I want to know from you, thoughts on the All-Star Game definitely being announced. And I know they're going to try to do something. And we still don't know the parameters of it as they just started opening up voting this last week or so. But do you think LeBron or any other player who thinks that they shouldn't even have an All-Star Game, do you think that they're off base? And again, we just talked about denigrating your product from an announcing standpoint. This is basically a guy saying he doesn't want the product to be adding more product out there. And the NBA is in a tough spot because they're trying to give TV product to a TV network that's paying them a lot of money. It's a hard situation to sort of manage.
I'll start with the caveat that LeBron, Giannis, Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, everybody who's spoken up and said, yeah, I'm not for this. They've all said, but if we have to have the game, we will show up to work and we will do our job. Sure. We understand why this is, needing to happen. It's interesting the backlash that's come out, especially from these top players. I think the underlying theme that's being missed here is they all kind of feel like they were hoodwinked a little bit, like maybe this wasn't communicated very well. It seems like all of them were under the impression that an all-star game was not going to happen this year because of the shortened season, the condensed season, obviously the pandemic, which has necessitated all of this stuff. So they had one thing in their mind that, yeah, this was going to be a break. This would be our chance to, have to quarantine a little bit, but actually be able to spend some family time, because right now that's been greatly reduced since you're not being able to travel back and forth. You can't just jump in and out of your personal lives. And it's not just maybe your immediate family, but hey, I want to see my mom and dad. I want to see aunts and uncles. I want to see family, friends, that sort of thing. I can't really do that right now. And I thought this break, especially for these teams like the Lakers and like the Bucks, who played deep into the season, didn't get much of a break over the summer. And it wasn't even the summer at that point. So that's been the feeling, is that like, wait, I thought we weren't doing this. And now, after the NBA, maybe implied that we weren't, and I don't know what the conversations were before this. Maybe that was never the case. It just wasn't communicated well. But I think there is the eyebrow raising part when they're like, wait, you just keep upping the stringency of the COVID protocols, right? We can't fist bump. We can't hug. We can't even talk to people at half court. We can't leave our hotel rooms.
Separating us when we're trying to dap at the end of a game, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do any of that stuff. But now all of a sudden it's okay to have the All-Star game where we're going to bring people from all sorts of different teams together to a state that has one of the more lax COVID protocols out there in Georgia. And they're doing that so that they can hopefully get fans there. You're right. It does smack of like a little bit of hypocrisy on the NBA side, but you also are absolutely right that without gate receipts, the league is not in a good financial place this year. They've had to take out loans to be able to cover this in order to make sure, especially the small market teams, are able to stay afloat and stay stringent. You can't go on much longer like that. They need to keep the TV deals up. That's why we wound up with 70-some games rather than like a 50-game season, which maybe made more sense actually to keep the schedule intact, but they couldn't do without the TV contract. So you had to do that. And All-Star Weekend, the All-Star Game, is one of those tentpole TV moments where you can line up a bunch of sponsors. They're going to be coming out of their ears. Like even watching the Kings game last night, you can see the little bits and pieces that the league is scrounging for money right now. Look at the Sacramento Kings floor. All of a sudden, instead of the baseline saying Sacramento Kings, it's like in one little corner, and you've got ads all over the floor right now. I've never seen that before on the NBA. And you watch any game, you see the fact that like the league, which was very anti-gambling for a long time, and some of this is that it's been legalized in a lot of states, but now all of a sudden the league is very open to bringing in all sorts of different deals with sports books, DraftKings included. So it's there. They need the money. And for the players, the one quote, I think it was Kawhi Leonard, he said, well, it's very clear it's not about health, it's about money. And it's like, yes, Kawhi, you are correct. But that money that's brought in, 51% or 52%, whatever it is, that's your paycheck too. That's your cut of the money. And you're probably not too keen to like have to take a pay cut or to have contracts stretched out in order to do this. You're not willing to do that either. So obviously the league isn't. And at this point, I don't think any NBA team is pulling in like the monster profits that in the last couple of years you could look at and go, okay, billionaire owners talking about millionaire players being selfish. That's a bunch of bull crap. I don't think you can really say that this year.
No, I mean, people sort of do that with baseball where two sides are just sort of screaming about, like you said, billions versus millions of dollars. But, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron, they're not interested in taking pay cuts to play fewer games. TNT, ESPN, they want their content because they're also having to fill. Advertisers are wanting to be able to get their stuff onto the product as well. It's balancing health and what probably is super safe protocol versus trying to make sure everyone still gets paid. Because even though the NBA is not, quote, a small business, it is still a business that has employees that aren't just Kawhi Leonard and LeBron and Giannis Antetokounmpo, that you're trying to keep as many like that's partially, it's partially why you see just at every one of these sporting events that you can't have people at just all these tarped up advertisements over seats, because you're doing every little thing you can, because at this point it's not about just making super profits. It's about making sure you don't lose money in a year that you don't want to lose money. And especially when you probably have contracts with a lot of these organizations that you want to do as much make good as possible, or at least not have to do, I should say, as much make good as possible when you can actually just sort of try to fulfill your obligations. It's a tough spot for everyone to sort of be in. But you're also basically, it seems like you're giving away like 3 days worth of festivities for just like one.
Yeah, and I will say this, I do commiserate with the players. You had a great point. I do commiserate with where they're coming from if they were under the impression that this was supposed to be a break and now that's taken away. So miscommunication, if that happened, or a change of plans. Change of plans happen, especially during, the pandemic. All of us have had to be very fluid with day-to-day and month-to-month plans, and heaven forbid trying to make long-range plans.
Oh, happening.
So that's just part of the nature of the beast here. But at the same time, you can sense the disappointment. You and I talked a couple weeks ago when it was first being floated that the All-Star game would happen. We said, man, it's trying to turn this around a month from now. And back then it was like 6 weeks. That seems awfully soon. Like maybe you should put this near the end of the season or after the end of the season, or maybe you need to have a longer break. I mean, that's what I thought this flexible schedule was supposed to be like, right? We were supposed to not know the second half of games because we were going to be flexible about this. So if you're going to truly put the All-Star game, the first week of March, then why not just lengthen the season a little bit more? Why not give the players the break that they thought they were going to have? If they were like signed up and said, yeah, we were supposed to have 10 days off, give them 10 days off in addition to whatever you need to take for the All-Star game. So now it's icing on the cake for your players and a little bit of an olive branch because they've had to make a lot of sacrifices. Yes, they're getting paid millions of dollars to do this, but they've had to make a lot of sacrifices too. Like there is a middle ground here. And I'm kind of hoping that, Chris Paul, the Players Association, or the players rep to the Players Association, the president was talking to, like, hey, I recognize their discomfort with this. They're entitled to their opinion. We're all trying to keep everybody happy. Obviously, we got to keep the league happy too. Like, I do think there's a compromise here where it doesn't have to be such an onerous thing because, like you said at the start of the question, the last thing you want is to go into the All-Star game with your top players all pissed off and not really into it, because instead of it being an honor, this is like a bigger drudge than ever. Like, you do not want that. So find a way to give the players what they want here and give them the time off. I mean, LeBron has earned it, right? The Lakers earned it. The teams that play deep into the playoffs, they earned the right to have a little bit of a breather here during this time.
Yeah, again, all the points that you make and that LeBron makes, they're valid, and then also you understand where the NBA is coming from. But someone somewhere is going to have to eat it a little bit if both sides are going to get happy, and that's where the compromise is. I just don't know where that is. Like everyone wants to seemingly know who the All-Stars are going to be, but like to have that. Like the Pro Bowl for the NFL, for example, which is a bunch of dudes playing video games.
Right.
You sort of recognize there's no point bringing all these dudes out to a stadium and then throwing them out there and can't have fans, blah, blah, blah. So similar here. It's like, do you care that LeBron's going to sort of 3/4 at best run up down the court 14 minutes in an All-Star game? Do you that badly need to sort of see James Harden if he gets voted, or Kevin Durant? I think Kevin Durant's leading the voting, I think, right now.
Yeah.
So, how much do you think Kevin Durant's going to give you in a pandemic All-Star game with nobody there?
Right. And well, and normally when you get snubbed, that's like such a big thing, and we're all up in arms. And this year, you might not hear the snubbed players complaining all that much. Like, oh, gee, darn, I didn't make the All-Star game. And maybe some guy who's got money riding on it in his contract will be upset. But I think for most people, like if I'm a former perennial All-Star, like a Kevin Love or a LaMarcus Aldridge, I'm kind of going, yeah, you know what? maybe this was the year that my game fell off a cliff and I'm not making the All-Star game anymore because this one's gonna suck. And at least I get, I get some days off that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah, so if the game is the 7th, the 4th is the last day of games that are on the schedule right now, and
that's too soon. There's no way to like properly quarantine everybody.
Yeah,
there's just no way.
And by the way, there are no other games on the schedule right now because we're in a pandemic. Who knows?
Well, and the other thing that'll come up is, and you don't want to see this, and I don't think LeBron is a pro. And Giannis is a pro. And those guys have said, if I need to show up and do my job, I will do my job. But I wouldn't put it past a couple of players, too, where like, oh, my ailments, my normal wear and tear of the season is too much, and I'm hurt. Therefore, I'm not going to the game. I think we may see a couple of those like nagging, smaller injuries where normally a guy would get up and go play, and instead of be like, yeah, find me a replacement. And the league doesn't want that. That's bad for the NBA.
It would be very bad for the NBA. But again, like how far down the list before you go before you just say, forget it, no more replacement. You're good. Like we're just gonna have 9 on this team. Something, whatever.
I mean, if we see Elfrid Payton in the NBA All-Star game, we know something bad has happened, right?
we know a lot of things went the wrong way for the All-Star game. And then all of a sudden, we're basically watching the Knicks and Kings. Look at that. Full circle. How about that?
Full circle.
All right. That's going to do it for us. Mr. Joel C. Cortez, thank you for your time. Good sir.
Yeah, thank you. The Andrei Kirilenko episode was a fun one. It is in the books. And Arky, before we go, let's tell people where they can find us. Obviously on Twitter. You're on Twitter. I'm not. I've gone the Charles Barkley old man route on that. You can find me on LinkedIn and find our show there, Joel Cordes. But Twitter and the new BbA YouTube channel just launched. We'll be putting our shows up there as well. The first video episodes we did were on your personal profile. Certainly tout that and whatever. But from now on, the new ones are going up on the YouTubes.
Yes, on YouTube. What's the channel name? Basketball by
It is BbA Show. Look up BbA Show on YouTube and you will find us.
Go ahead and subscribe because that is sexy. That's it. That's where we're at. Do us a favor. Go to Manscaped. Thank them. Go to DraftKings and set up your account and support the Brawl Network as well because they doing good things like we doing good things. If you like all kinds of spurts talk like your favorite NFL teams, your favorite NBA teams are coming up too, and some good, just great sports talk there. You can find it on the Brawl Network, just like you can find BbA.
See everybody.